you've probably seen the headlines. Big changes coming for internationally qualified nurses looking to register with AHPRA. If you're a nurse from the US, UK, Canada, Ireland, Singapore, or Spain, the announcement sounds promising. But before you get too excited, let's actually unpack what this means. It's still actually unclear why waiting until April 2025 could put you at a bit of a disadvantage. In today's episode, you are going to learn about what's actually changing in AHPRA's registration. The government isn't telling you about how this will be implemented. And we're going to bust some myths and common misunderstandings that I'm already hearing spread about these changes. Let's talk about what you should be doing now so you don't get stuck in the backlog. Hey nurses, it's Rhea Fawale here, your go-to Australian solicitor and CEO of SOLVi Migration. If you're new here, I say welcome. And just to let you know, I spent 20 years working in Australian government. That includes 12 years as a senior manager in immigration and also as a director in the Department of Health. So when it comes to migration and your nursing registration, I know exactly how these government processes are going to play out. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 24th episode of Making Australian Migration Easy. Today, we're going to talk about the truth about AHPRA's 2025 nurse registration changes. Let's be real. When a government minister makes an announcement, especially in the lead up to an election year, that's what's happening in Australia right now, it's designed to sound amazing. It's political, and it gets people excited. But having worked inside government for 2 decades, I know that the reality is very different. Let's take what's in the media headlines and put it in perspective for you. Firstly, just because it's an announcement doesn't mean that it's law yet. Policies take time to be implemented, and often the details are missing when they're first introduced. There'll be no extra staff, no extra budget. AHPRA has suddenly got a whole new team to process thousands of additional applications overnight. You may recall when New Zealand changed its nurse registration rules in December 2023, they actually had to shut their system down for a 2-month period. And directly after that, they issued mandated 5-month backlog. So you just have to wait. Do you really think that Australia is going to be that different? Misinformation is already spreading, and many nurses are also hearing about English language exemptions and assuming that they aren't going to need to take any English tests for their visa. But registration is not the same as migration, and I'll explain why in a moment. All right, let's take a dive into what's actually changing. We've had an announcement. What's the announcement versus the reality? The proposed change, which is not yet in effect, means that nurses who are currently nursing, so let's say you didn't do your qualifications in these countries, but you're nursing in the US, UK, Canada, Ireland, Singapore, or Spain, and you've already got 1,800 clinical hours after you got your PIN there, you may be qualifying for direct registration with AHPRA from April 2025 instead of going through the New Zealand route, which most of you would have done before. Sounds great, right? But here's what you don't know yet. What about nurses with diploma qualifications? What about nurses who did a bachelor's top-up and they'd done a diploma in their home country? These things are still not clear with AHPRA. So how is AHPRA actually going to be verifying your clinical experience as well? There's quite a bit that still needs to be worked out and nuanced, and we've been having meetings as much as we can to get this, but it's being worked out because it was an announcement, not yet implemented. So how fast will it actually be processed? AHPRA doesn't know yet. So until they work out the actual situation, don't assume that you're automatically eligible. Let's get some clear advice. So what happened in New Zealand and why does it matter to you? You may recall, so when New Zealand introduced its new OSCE, that was in December 2023, the system shut down for 2 months. and there was huge processing delays, and they now have a mandated 5-month wait. In addition to that, from 1 July, they implemented an NCLEX. So there's various changes that continue to be implemented. And this is what happens when an announcement happens. A department then needs to figure out how to actually implement it. So there's going to potentially be increased costs. We don't know. We have to see what's going on. My lesson here is that even if a process is called fast-tracked, initial implementation is never going to be smooth. So let's get clear on that. The other thing to remember, English language. What is the myth? What do you really need to know? Okay. One of the biggest misunderstandings I'm seeing about the English language exemptions, people are assuming that because they've come from English-speaking countries, they're going to be exempted, as they are with New Zealand. Potentially, we're not sure. But just because AHPRA removes an English language requirement doesn't mean you don't need one for a visa. Migration processes are totally separate to your AHPRA registration. Let's understand exemptions properly when it comes to migration. So the reality is that English language is completely separate from registration. Let's talk about the actual rule when it comes to visas in Australia. If you hold a passport that is from the US, UK, Canada, or Ireland, you are automatically deemed to have competent English under Australia's migration rules. So that's what counts for an employer-sponsored visa. So no test needed there. But if you want to migrate independently, even if you hold one of these exempted passports, you're going to need to take the test, because competent English, when it comes to general skilled migration, is 0 points. And you're talking about trying to migrate using points. Remember, if your passport isn't from one of these countries, you can't be exempted. It doesn't matter if you have worked in a country that speaks English or have substantial experience. And often people try to rely on things like education and so on. Migration rules in Australia are very separate to the registration. All right, let's give you some actionable takeaways for this. This is what you should be doing now to get ready. My advice to all of you is don't wait until April 2025 to start getting ready. Get your documents ready and don't just assume that that rule is going to come into effect the day that it clocks over to be April 2025, and be prepared for the fact that there may be some delays and changes along the way. What you can prepare for, though, is getting your documentation in order. You're going to need evidence of all of your clinical hours, any past examinations that you have done, and your nursing qualifications, including the academic transcripts. Get migration advice early, because even if the AHPRA registration gets easier, visas still have strict requirements, and there can be delays that are common in this area. Also, have a backup plan. Remember, we still don't know what's going to happen with nurses who did diplomas or master's qualifications instead of a straightforward bachelor's. So we don't know how that's going to be treated under this change. We hope that it's going to be treated the same, but we don't know. So be prepared and have a plan B. If you need to get your AHPRA registration sorted, I recommend you check out a nurse registration course. It's got everything that you need to know, including assessing which pathway is going to be best for you. You can enroll at www.nurseregistration.com. And if you check out the link below, we've got a little discount for everyone who is listening to this episode. Now, if you're not sure how these changes could affect your migration plan, of course, I'm going to recommend that you book a consultation with an expert Australian immigration lawyer or migration agent. We do those at SOLVi Migration. You can book at www.solvi.com.au. Nurses, I know it can be stressful and overwhelming, but with the right planning, you can set yourself up for success. Don't wait until April 2025 and risk getting caught in a backlog. Get started now and get started with the right advice. Australia needs nurses, and we'd love to see you here soon. I hope you found this episode helpful. Please drop your comments below and let me know what else you'd like to hear about. Of course, we'll be doing another update as soon as the rules become clear. Please like, subscribe, and share. And we look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Making Australian Migration Easy.